Hello, and welcome to the first day of developer sessions here at EGX 2017. Thank you very much for coming, and hi to everybody watching the stream online as well. Coming up later today, we've got sessions on Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. I'm going to be joined by some tech journalists from Digital Foundry to talk about Xbox One X and the future of console technology. We've got a session on the board game City of Kings, and at the end of it, Jake Solomon from Firaxis will be telling us how they managed to save XCOM from disaster. But opening things today, we have a very, very special guest. You'll know him as the actor who brought to life such creations as Gollum in Lord of the Rings, Supreme Leader Snoke in Star Wars, King Kong in King Kong, and most significantly for me, Captain Haddock in The Adventures of Tintin. But he's always been involved in games as well. He's worked in the past on games like Heavenly Sword and Enslaved, and he's getting even more involved now with his motion capture studio, Imaginarium. They are producing a new video game based on the Planet of the Apes movies. He is, of course, Andy Serkis.
Morning all.
All right, well, thanks very much for coming, Andy.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I guess let's start at the beginning. Obviously, you're most well known for your performance capture roles. How did you come about that you first became involved in performance capture acting?
Well, it was back in 1999. I auditioned for Lord of the Rings, and it was a very straightforward audition. And my agent had said to me, "Look, Andy, they're making this film Lord of the Rings down in New Zealand. They're looking for someone to do the voice of a digital character." And I said, "Well, I'm not a voice actor. I'm not someone who just turns up in a booth and does voices. I'm an actor. So there must be a load of decent parts in that movie. Can you get me up for something proper?" And they said, "Well, it's this character called Gollum." And I said, "Well, you know, if it's a CG character, I don't know if I'm that interested." And then they said, "Well, they're thinking of using this technology where you sort of you're acting, but you won't finally be seen on screen." So I thought, well, how do I go about auditioning for this? I started working on the character. I started creating a voice and a physicality for the role, and went on tape. And Peter Jackson saw it, and then invited me to come and meet with him. And he said, "Look, there's a real breakthrough about to happen with technology and acting, and we think we're on ahead of the curve here. We want this to be the most emotionally engaging character, CG character to date, and we're using this capture technique. But I want you to come and just act Gollum, because previously up to that point in visual effects movies, actors had to act against the tennis ball on a stick and imagine what that character or creature would be doing." So Peter was determined that the actor playing Gollum would be there on set acting with the other actors. And so that was how it all started. I turned up in New Zealand and researched the character and created the voice and the physicality for Gollum, and we started working on those movies. And at that time, I was shooting on the live action sets, and my first day, in fact, was shooting 6,000 foot up a mountain in a skimpy lycra suit, and everybody was wondering what the hell was going on. But also, after I'd shot the scenes, I'd have to go off and shoot them again in a small little area called a volume. And it was the first time I saw a CG version of Gollum where if I lifted up my arm or started to move around as the character, I could see it on a screen. So that was really the birth of it. Since then, it's sort of evolved in so many different ways. It's gone through from just being physical capture to entire performance capture using head-mounted cameras with markers on your face to pick up all of your subtle facial expressions. And that happened when we were doing King Kong, which was the next film. And then beyond that, it sort of evolved with Tintin and then into the Apes movies by being able to shoot out on location. So it went from being on set to literally out on location. And in the last movie, War for the Planet of the Apes, I don't know if many of you have seen. In fact, how many of you have seen War for the Planet of the Apes? Oh yeah, fair few of you, so that's cool. We were shooting out in very, very difficult conditions, Canadian winter, snow up to our waists at times, and it's got much more robust as a technology.
Would you say that's the biggest change for you as an actor, being able to actually be able to go out on location and shoot?
Well, no, I mean, no, the challenge is with, performance capture it's got to be understood. Acting is acting. There's no difference between playing, when I research and make a character or build a character, embody a character, if I'm doing it in front of a camera with a costume and makeup as myself, it's not a different approach to creating a character than using performance capture technology and going on stage and playing a role. It's not a type of acting, and I think that's the biggest thing that's misunderstood. Performance capture is a technology that allows an actor to transform into anything. It's like digital makeup. It is like a kind of digital makeup. So the process of acting itself isn't really informed by that technology.
And what made you think, yeah, this is the medium for me, I'm going to make a go of it in performance capture?
What I loved about it was, it was the epiphany kind of moment for me was at the end of The Lord of the Rings, when I was about to, I thought, go back to my career as being a more traditional actor in film and television and on stage. And then Peter Jackson said, "Do you want to play King Kong?" And I thought, this is amazing, because 1 minute I've been playing this 3.5-foot ring junkie, and then he's asked me to play a 25-foot gorilla. This means the end of typecasting. This means that an actor can play absolutely anything, and that's what I love about it. And it doesn't matter what size you are, what shape you are, what color your skin is, what sex you are. You can play anything. You can embody anything. There's something incredibly egalitarian about it as a tool for an actor in the 21st century. It means you're not just cast according to your facial, what you look like, and that is what, and the ability to then completely bury yourself in a character and completely own that character and author that role, and actually but be totally inside of it and unrecognizable, for me, I found thrilling.
I think people think of it as quite sort of physical discipline, but voice must be a huge part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, people sort of, going back to the original thing about, people still say to me, "Did you do the voice of Gollum?" And I go, "No." And they say, "Did you do the voice of Caesar?" And I go, "No." And, and they sort of, some people just still don't get the idea that character is constructed of the personality, the inner being of the character, and how that being expresses itself through voice, through physicality, through silence, through silent beats, through silent moments. In War for the Planet of the Apes, a lot of the film is carried in close-up, big close-ups, like these, where you're really concentrating on the internal emotions of the character without any sort of physicality at all, and so I think that's and actually, as the technology has improved and the artistry and the visual effects team Weta that have been working on all of the Apes movies and actually on a lot of the movies that I've done, going back to Lord of the Rings, the artistry now that can take that actor's performance and the fidelity of that actor's performance is replicated on the face, the physiognomy of the apes now is beyond, so it's getting to a really great point, and I just find it continues to be a thrilling, actor's tool.
What are the most exciting technology developments in the field at the moment? What's going to be the next thing to happen to performance capture?
Well, the remarkable thing about it is that performance capture, really up to this point, has been used mostly in tentpole movies, big blockbuster movies, as an expensive piece of kit, but now, and the reason why we created the Imaginarium was to be able to bring it to repeatable TV series, animated TV series, to work in video game, work in the video game arena and bring real emotional performance to video game. And then, of course, we're starting to explore virtual reality and augmented reality. So motion capture, or performance capture as we now call it, really sits in the middle. It's absolutely at the epicenter of all of these different forms of expression. And actually, beyond that, we've just this last year worked on the first, at the Imaginarium, we worked on the first character to be created for a live action on-stage theatre performance at the Royal Shakespeare Company up the road of The Tempest. We had the actor playing Ariel on stage as himself in a motion capture suit, and then projected as avatar characters that he shapeshifts between on stage. And so there are so many brilliant, exciting new arenas for performers and actors.
And how do you think it's going to change the film and video game industries in the future, this technology?
Well, I think it's, again, one of the things that we're fascinated with at the Imaginarium is the notion of next generation storytelling. How will we receive stories in 10, 20, 30 years' time? Will it be that we are just watching screens in a passive way, or probably not? It feels like it's with virtual reality and augmented reality and gaming, it feels like we're moving towards an era of storytelling that you are very much part of. That's what this is all about. So I think the steps are taken. I imagine in 25 years' time we might find ourselves in a cross between a piece of theatre, but that you're part of, or a piece of theatre / game / film that you're not only watching, but that you're part of, like a cross between secret cinema meets kind of punch-drunk theatre meets great video gaming in virtual reality or something like that, where you're so immersed in the game and yet it's great storytelling and edited storytelling, so that you're led through this great journey.
We're at a game show. Let's talk about video games. You've actually been closely involved in games in the past, particularly with the studio Ninja Theory. You worked on Heavenly Sword and Enslaved with them. How did that come about?
Well, Tamim Antoniades, who is the CEO of Ninja Theory, when I came back from doing King Kong, we met up. And he approached me and he said, "Look, I've got a script for this new video game, and traditionally, and I wasn't a gamer up to that point, I really wasn't, but I was becoming aware that my kids were starting to play games, and I wanted to be in touch with them, and suddenly saw this incredible opportunity that, the old games cinematics were sort of fluff, really, on the whole. They were sort of good fluff, but they were sort of fluff. They were just padding between great gameplay, and Tamim said to me, nobody's really interested in the cutscenes because they're not well performed. The scripts are pretty awful, and they don't really add to anything in terms of, and we want to change that. We want the story to flow. We want it to be a seamless kind of movement between cutscene and game. And so he said, and I'd love you to direct the performance capture. So we rehearsed it like a film. We went into a lot of character development with all of the actors. We rehearsed it like a film or a play. We did proper rehearsals. And then I couldn't actually shoot it in the UK because at that time we didn't have the technology. So I flew everybody over back to New Zealand, and we actually shot it with Weta Digital, which made me think, this is crazy. In the UK, the technology is made in Cambridge, and the software is made in Oxford, and we're having to fly to New Zealand to make this game. It's nuts. So I had this idea to set up a company called the Imaginarium, and then I've co-founded it with my producing partner, Jonathan Cavendish, back in 2011. It took some years to get going, with the idea of working on not only films, but video games, and so on and so forth. But the Ninja Theory experience was extraordinary, because what it proved was that actually at that time, again, going back now some time, now it's part of all gaming now, that the story is part of the gaming. But then when we moved on to Enslaved, that when Alex Garland, wrote the script for that, he was very determined, because he was a big gamer, that he wanted that the gameplay was absolutely seamless, so that you're absolutely in it as the drama is unfolding. And that's what led us to this point. This is our first game. I'm here with the Planet of the Apes, The Last Frontier, and that is our first game that comes out of the Imaginarium Studios, obviously through my association with the movies, because it's such an incredible metaphor and a great storytelling device. And we wanted to create an interactive movie, sort of what I've been talking about, really. So very, very beautifully rendered, very much, very engaging emotionally, choice-based game that encourages you to live. You can play the game basically through the eyes of humans and through the eyes of apes. You can choose which journey to go on. But we wanted it to be to have the tonality and the emotionality of the films. And those of you who've seen the films will know what I'm talking about when you play the game, if you play the game. It's not the same characters, so it's not just like a straight movie to video game experience. It's a completely brand new set of characters who are a parallel tribe of apes who are trying to survive after the major conflict has begun between humans and apes, and both sides are clinging on for survival. And so it really follows that the clan led by a leader, Khan, who is again a peacekeeping ape who's trying to ensure the survival of his kind, and then his 3 sons, Tolla, who is a rather violent ape who sees all enemies as humans and wants to take them out. The middle son, Bryn, who's actually the character that you play in the game, who is more of a, sort of the middle child caught between Tolla and Juno, who is the youngster who has a withered arm and is a bit of a liability, but is innocent in the story. And Bryn, who is the character that if you play as an ape, you become. And it's this very emotionally taut, interactive game which on PS4 is supported by PlayLink, so you can play on your mobiles and is a multiplayer game. Multiplayer game. So it's thrilling, and I think it's a really great example of, in the same vein as, I mean, I was really inspired by Hard Rain, and that game really, I think, speaks to this. The feel of this one particularly, it's very much it's not a hardcore game. I don't believe this is a hardcore game, a game in the slightest. It's very much a game for a wide gaming audience.
What can you do with the Apes world in this game that you couldn't do in the film? What's the opportunity there?
Well, the opportunity is to keep it expanding and to basically take the point of view of both apes and humans. And it sort of does that in the movie. Matt Reeves' movies, and Rupert Wyatt, who directed the first one, although they are ape-centric movies, you still feel emotional connection to the human characters. But I think in this game, even more so, I think it encourages you to think in such a different way if you're playing as an ape. There are scenes in this which I don't want to give anything away, actually. I don't want to give too much away. But there are scenes which really make you question your humanity or your ape-manity, however you want to put it, depending on which side you play. But because it's a moral maze, this game, and makes you very much responsible. I think it's a great kind of moral conundrum.
That's great. I think we've got some time to take some questions from the audience now. If you guys, we're going to have a mic in the center aisle. If you want to form a queue behind the mic, if you've got a question for Andy. Bear in mind, Andy isn't actually a coder. He didn't write every line of the game himself, so he may not be able to answer some of the most detailed questions about the gameplay. But he's obviously happy to take questions about that or about his career in acting. So
I'm really not a coder. Don't all rush.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, come on. I don't think you're on. Hold on.
Not really.
Do you want to borrow mine? There you go.
It's mine. Just a quick question. I'm an absolute huge fan of your work, not only with the gaming as well as the films. I just wondered how many David Attenborough documentaries did you see to do your research in being Caesar?
So when I was researching Caesar, I spent, actually, previously, when I was working on King Kong, I spent quite a lot of time literally with apes in zoos, with gorillas in zoos, and then I went to Rwanda to study mountain gorillas because I wanted to see the difference between gorillas in captivity and gorillas in the wild, and they're hugely different. Apes that are surrounded by human beings very, very much reflect human behaviour. So when I was working on Caesar, I actually based him on a real chimpanzee called Oliver, who in the 1970s was quite well known. He was actually very human in the way that he was known as the humanzee. In fact, he was stood bipedally. He walked bipedally rather. His expressions, his facial expressions, were incredibly human. And when he sat in a chair, it was almost like a human being was sitting in a chair. So I kind of followed that particular ape because I wanted to, when I was constructing the character of Caesar, to feel like like this was an outsider character, that there was almost like Caesar was almost like a human in an ape's skin. The fate of Oliver, this character, was quite extraordinary. A lot of DNA experiments were performed on him because people truly believed he was the progeny of a man and an ape, that he could possibly be this missing link character. So yes, I based him very closely on that. But what's important about when you're researching apes is that you start to, after a while, you know, when people said, so you had to go and do a lot of research on monkeys and apes, and I go, yeah, but that's like saying you have to do a lot of research on humans, because we're so close. I mean, it was like literally watching human beings, going and watching a troop of gorillas in Rwanda, 23 gorillas, and, you know, just watching the family structure, the alpha males, the females, the teenagers, the kids playing. You know, it was like being in this sort of, it was like being in this weird kind of hippie commune. It was really bizarre, you know. But they were just all hanging out and eating, and then chilling, and then, you know, then getting up and going off and finding a new place to forage. It was a really humbling experience, but you realise that they're all so individual in their characters, and that's what performance capture is about. It's about it's not about doing. I think people think it's like doing monkey movements, you know, doing sort of like and pantomiming these characters, but it's about understanding the subtlety of the nature of these beings, and then of course when you're playing an ape that can talk, then it's finding a way of how that translates into, you know, and because Caesar is obviously an evolving ape as well, so how he evolved as a character was a huge part of the journey.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
So, no spoilers, obviously, but Caesar's story's wrapped up now. Is that it for the movie series, or are you going to come back for another one, perhaps?
Well, the thing is, this is what we call well, without spoiling it too much for the people who haven't seen it.
Yeah. Just wrapped up.
Yeah, it kind of wraps up the Caesar cycle, as we call it. But obviously, the story ends at this particular, in this chapter, leaving still a long way to go before we return to the original film, the 1968 version of Planet of the Apes. It's still, you know, a good chunk of time away. So it's really, I think there's plenty of stories to be had about how the apes then evolve, how then the humans become their cattle in a way. So I think there is appetite there for more stories, and yeah, there's the time gap is still there to create that.
And you'd come back and do another ape?
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, I do love the franchise. I love the metaphor of apes and seeing the world through the ape's eyes as a way of seeing our human condition. You know. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good. I hope so.
Thanks.
We rarely get to see your face when you're in films because it's mainly CGI. So which on-screen role would you most like to have stolen from somebody else?
That's a really good question. Oh my God. I think I'd probably quite like to have played Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, because that's one of my favourite movies. I thought Robert De Niro's performance in that film was extraordinary. So yeah. I mean, there was such an intense part, and very, very internalised and very brutal, and a great sense of loss in that character. And I thought it was an extraordinary role. Yeah, I'd like to play that. Thank you. Can you arrange that?
Hello.
Hello, mate.
Oh yeah. I've got a question about Star Wars.
Oh no.
Obviously, you've said that you've gone into a lot of detail with your characters for Planet of the Apes. How much information did you have to create Snoke? Because obviously no one knows anything. And how much do you know?
I know enough to play the character. This is a trick question, I can just tell. Unfortunately, I can't reveal any of it. I know the reasoning behind it is why I can't say too much is because I really don't want it to spoil the mystery of the character, and there is a mystery to the character, and it's coming up soon, and I get asked this so often about Snoke, and I always have to you know, people always say, so tell me about him, and I go, okay, all right, here we go. And they go, no, don't tell me. You know, so people do want to know and they don't want to know. But I obviously know what the character is. Of course, you have to as an actor. You know, I know who he is, where he comes from, what he represents. And that will soon be out of the bag, and it'll unfold itself. But and I wish I could tell you more, but I can't.
Can you do one thing?
Yeah.
Can you do There's Been Awakening? There's the line from the first trailer.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
Hey, in The Hobbit, I believe you helped direct with Jackson. Will you be interested in directing more movies later on?
Absolutely. So I was the second unit director on The Hobbit, and I shot over the course of the 3 movies. I shot for about 200 days with the second unit. So there's a lot of staff, and have been directing since. And that was also part of the reason that I set the Imaginarium up with Jonathan Cavendish, my partner. Was with a view to direct, and actually, the video game process, everything was leading up towards more and more directing, and so I've over the course of the last 3 or 4 years been directing. I have a version of Jungle Book, which I've directed for Warner Brothers, which stars Christian Bale as Bagheera the Panther and Cate Blanchett as Kaa the Snake and Benedict Cumberbatch as Shere Khan the Tiger. We started working on that 3 years ago, and that's coming out next year. And in the middle of that period, because the Disney one was coming out, and there was for a period of time the Warner Brothers and the Disney film were neck and neck, and it was like, who's going to come out first? But we wanted to spend time really evolving the facial capture side of it, because we were using performance capture. I mean, the actors really do play the roles of all of the animals in this movie. So we decided to take a hiatus, and during that hiatus I've shot another film called Breathe, which is opening the London Film Festival in a couple of weeks' time, October the 4th. And that is a very true story. It's a very inspiring love story, something very different for me, about the lives of this couple, Robin and Diana Cavendish, who happen to be my business partner, Jonathan's parents. And it's about surviving a terrible disability with incredible grace and humour, and choosing to live life to its fullest with a massive disability outside of the hospital system in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. So it's a sort of pioneering story which is fueled by this incredible love that they have for each other. And it's absolutely true. All the events in the film are true. And that's become my directorial debut, even though I'd started filming Jungle Book quite a long time ago, and will be coming out next year. So yes, and we're developing further projects, one of which is Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm, which we're, again, our studio, the Imaginarium, are going to be providing the performance capture for, amongst other things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi Andy, big
Hello,
fan. I just wanted to say, for those that want to get into the film industry, and particularly visual effects, what kind of advice do you have for people that want to get the foot into the door?
I think, and there are some great courses now, amazing courses, Bournemouth, Portsmouth, they're places to head for. And then the NFTS as well, the National Film Television School. They're really great courses and great visual effects courses. And then I would just also, there's so much opportunity now for just experimenting on a smaller level, with available consumer products, which you can start to use, using green screen for a start, and or stop motion, or there are even forms of sort of cheap performance capture tools out there, So I think just get making, just find a story that you're really passionate about, make a short film that you want to embed with which is a visual effects sort of driven film, and get making. I think that's the way, and then approach some of these courses, which there are great ones about.
All right, thanks very much. Cheers.
Yeah, hi Andy. Big fan, of course.
Oh, thanks.
But just now that I've heard you say you're doing a new version of Animal Farm, I'm curious, what will you be acting in it, and if so, what character would you play?
I'm not going to act in it, actually. I'm going to direct it. But yeah, I can't tell you the cast yet because it's not announced, but we've got a really pretty great cast for it. And we're developing it. It's as if Orwell were writing Animal Farm for today, what would his political targets be? Obviously, of its time, it was a metaphor for Stalinism and totalitarianism, and now what is the 21st century version of totalitarianism, and that we're centering it very much in a world that is driven by... It's about greed and innocence. Ultimately, the story is a parable about greed and innocence. And so we're setting it in a North American Rust Belt farm that gets taken over by, potentially gets taken... starts to become a cooperative and ends up being taken over by the conglomerates, and big business, and with 0 hours contracts and so on. It's very much about work malpractice in the workplace. And I think it'll be a family film. It'll be funny. It'll be also very dark, and I think it's going to be pretty cool.
All right then. Thank you. And just finally, for another great course of VFX, you can go to NUA, Norwich University of Art, which I'm
the Norwich University of Art
Yeah.
is also a great visual effects course by all accounts.
Which, I'm on games.
Oh, fantastic.
So hopefully, I could see you as your future boss. My future boss.
Nice one.
Thank you.
Hi, Andy.
Hello, mate.
My name's Andy as well.
Hello, Andy.
Just a quick one, really. What would you say is the biggest misconception of performance capture acting?
I think people think it's that it's not created by the actor, that somehow it's augmented in a post-production process, and that it's sort of like drug-assisted sport, that it doesn't come from the actor, and it actually does. It's all so the role, the creation of the role, is entirely down to the actor. They read the script and play the character from page. They rehearse, they're on set, they work with the director. The director then puts that performance in the cut, in the edit. And so for months and months and months, that director, in this case Matt Reeves on War for the Planet of the Apes, is watching my face and Terry Notary's face and Karen Carnival, all the actors playing the apes. And the drama is cut around those performances. So the film could actually live or die by the performances that you watch. And actually, when the early screenings of the film are shown, they're not even watching apes. They're watching Planet of the actors in mocap suits. But the drama still has to carry, and that's the thing. That's what people misunderstand. So that the visual effects, and this is not taking anything away from what visual effects do, because they are extraordinary geniuses, and they have to, of course, a human's face is not the same physiognomy as an ape's face. There has to be translation. But the trick is, and what is becoming much, much more refined as the years go by, is that you don't move away from what the actor has done on the day, but you're able to translate that performance onto the facial structure of a different avatar. And we're facing that with Jungle Book now. It's difficult enough translating an actor's face into an ape, which is fairly similar, but imagine doing that with a panther. Christian Bale as a panther, but it's working. It's actually working. You can see all of Christian's choices, his acting, his emotion, you read everything in his face, but it's on the face of a panther. And so I think it's understanding that the playing of the role, the authorship of the role is identical to if I was playing the role in a costume and makeup, and was going on to set, or whether I've got a sort of, as I say, digital makeup applied to me afterwards. There's no difference in the acting process.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Hello, Andy.
Hello, mate.
I'd like to see if you can tell me which is the first game that you ever got your hands on, and also your most favourite game outside of the ones that you actually worked on.
The first games that I played, I had to go on an intensive gaming course when I first started with Ninja Theory, because I really was not a gamer. So they gave me Silent Hill, and that was the first game I played, and I thought, holy shit, this is terrifying. I just thought this was incredible. It was so immersive, and so, and then. And then it was Hard Rain, actually. It was the next one, and I again sort of really love that. But I do like Assassin's Creed. I think Assassin's Creed is a great game, and my sons are all big Call of Duty fans, and I love watching them play that. I'm not very good at it myself, but Call of Duty's great.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Hello,
I
mate.
just wanted to ask, out of all your big projects, what was your favourite one and why?
Well, that's a really difficult question, actually. Look, I've got a huge affinity for Lord of the Rings because it was the character and the process that has sparked off a journey that I otherwise would never have had as an actor and filmmaker and sort of person involved in performance capture. So the experience of making those movies was pretty extraordinary. The whole life of the film and shooting those three movies together in such an epic way over a year and a half, and then the constant returning to New Zealand to do pickups over the next few years. You know, that I think was a huge part of and continues to be a huge part of my life. But equally, on another kind of the other edge of the spectrum, I did a film about Ian Dury called Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, and I loved making that movie. And it was a very small, independent British movie. And anybody out there Ian Dury fans or know about Ian Dury? Great, 3 people. No, there's about 5 of you. So Ian Dury was kind of pretty much the proto sort of punk artist of the 1970s who actually had a polio disability himself, and was just this force of nature, poet, punk, and it was about his life, and I got to record all of the songs with the original band he played with, which was the Blockheads. So all the songs in the movie I recorded with the original band, which was amazing, and got to know his family, and they gave so much of themselves to help me create the character. So that was equally a really those two things are very different ends of the spectrum, but those 2 films.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Hello.
Hey.
Right. My question being, particularly I noticed Sir Ian McKellen, he had a lot of agency in the role that he played in, obviously, Lord of the Rings, and also going to Enslaved, a game that you worked on. Big fan of that. What kind of agency as an actor do you have to maybe move the story based on what your interpretation of the character is versus the writers, per se?
During the filmmaking process?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it depends. It really does depend on the project. For instance, and who you're collaborating with. Because you work with some directors who have written a version of the script, and you are, as an actor, you come on board and you can be really quite involved in shaping how the character is, even though it's on the page a particular way, through the exploration, through the filmmaking process, through each scene that is built and rehearsed and shot. You know, you learn something new about the character, and so that informs when you go into the next rehearsal for the next scene. It's like, well, actually now we've discovered that about the character. Let's try and shift it this way, and so there's that kind of filmmaking where you're working with directors who allow you to sort of not co-write, but to really push your interpretation of the character onto it, and then sometimes there are projects which are more prescribed, and you're turning up, and the director has a very strong idea about the character. So it's all about collaboration. And for instance, on the Planet of the Apes series, and working with Matt Reeves, you know, it's like the script that he wrote was story-wise was what you see, but kind of the dialogue was sort of intentional dialogue. So what I mean by that is it was like, it doesn't have to be said exactly like that. Let's find a way of expressing what the intent of this line means. So that's another way of engaging. And then, for instance, the whole way that Caesar evolves, and the way that he begins to use speech, and that is very much an acting part of the process. And so again, that would inform how the dialogue's used and so on. So it can vary from project to project.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm a bit short for this, Mike. Hello. My question is about the acting side of stuff. With playing really in-depth characters like Gollum and Caesar, when you finish the day's filming, do you find it hard to shift back into being Andy Serkis, or are you still doing the mannerisms of Gollum when you're making a cup of tea, or, you know?
Well, it's interesting because like when you've been playing a character for a long time and you come back to, you come back to human world, like, because we shot, like, War for the Planet of the Apes was a 5.5-month shoot, and you do realise actually that there are certain physical things that you've been carrying around in your physicality. So, for instance, you know, whenever I used to get up out of a chair, I'd always kind of get up off my knuckles and all sort of things like that, you know, or sort of when I'd been playing with the kids, I'd sort of, or picking something up, a knife and fork, you find, oh my God, I'm holding it like Caesar does. Yeah, that's crazy, you know. Things like that, which because your muscle memory has been holding on to all of this stuff for months and months, or even the way that you hold, you know, the holding yourself, or yeah. So you do that muscle memory does sort of take time to drain out. I don't think hopefully, psychologically, I've managed to shift out the characters, and that I'm not a complete nightmare to live. But I probably am a bit of a nightmare to live with, actually.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, it looks like that's all we've got time for, so I'll just say thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Andy Serkis. That was fascinating. Thanks.
Thank you.